Now, our finance minister seems optimistic. I mean, she said it is high, but it's acceptable. I'd like to ask you, what's your take on this? Are we really okay when it comes to our rising domestic debt?
Well, I could say, like, I agree with her to a large extent that statistically, we are fine. And when she said that although it's high, we are okay, it's because you look at the statistics. Yes, we have about 6.8 trillion in total, both local and foreign debt. But again, this is just about 17.8% of the total GDP. Now, for emerging market, it is acceptable that it could be up to 40%. Nigeria has a target of 30% of GDP, and developed market have about 60%. So based on that, it is easy for her to say, okay, fair enough, since we're just about 17.8% of GDP, we are fine. Again, when you look at, okay, what is the amount of money that is being spent to service, like you said, about the provision for debt servicing, it's about 19% of total revenue. Now, that is huge. When about a fifth of the total revenue is being used for debt servicing, then we have only about 80% to do every other thing. I think that is the problem. And this is because of high interest rate. Do you understand? I mean, again, you can come around and say, okay, our deficit, which this borrowing is covering, is just about 2.85, which is still within the 3% allowable to, and even our fiscal responsibility act. But the question is, at this high interest rate, how sustainable can this be?
But Femi, really, what does our domestic debt really consist of? Can you give us a picture or rundown of what are the sources of this domestic debt?
Yeah, well, the domestic debt are principally federal government local debt and the treasury bills that are being used by the central bank to manage the supply of money. But basically about 70% of the entire local debt is federal government bonds of various years from 1 to 20%, and then, one year to 20-year maturity, and then treasury bills about 30%, the rest.
Now, there's obviously concern over the current climate where we're seeing higher interest rates, and of course the threat that these higher interest rates may pose when it comes to our domestic debts. If our domestic debt keeps growing and higher interest rates keep growing as well, what is going to be the implication? So, I mean, give me your take. What threat does this pose?
I mean, the threat about it is, I said it earlier, is the fact that it's going to continually take the large chunk of the revenue that's available to spend in, year out. For example, yes, it's easy for us to say we are benchmarking ourselves against the international community and saying we are fine. But when you look at interest rates in other countries, they are quite very low compared to Nigeria. For example, look at the 10-year bond. And look at the interest in that. In the US, about 2.03. In the UK, about 2.22. In the EU, about 1.69. And in the entire BRICS, the average about 6.61. With India and Russia having the highest about 8.55. Now, Nigerian bond, 10-year bond is about 15.43. That's quite high. So what it means is that the cost of servicing this debt is going to continue increasing, and therefore reduce the amount of money available for other developmental projects or even servicing of whole overhead of government. So the implication is that if it continues to grow, then it gets probably to a time that half of the budget will probably be for debt servicing alone. And the question is, what are we using this debt for? Consumption or investment? And that's where the problem is. If we have been investing this debt all these while, I mean, the amount of money that we'll be needing for further, to borrow further will have been reducing gradually. So I think the concern of the Minister of Finance is, okay, now we are pushing interest rate, and again, the Monetary Authority is increasing interest rate because of the expansionary view of the fiscal policy. So somebody has to give something, and that's what the Fiscal Authority is trying to do now. We need to encourage the private sector and not just government alone. So I think that's where the problem is.
Now, the Minister of Finance did say that she aims to bring domestic debt down to 500 billion naira by 2015. I mean, how realistic is this? And how does she plan to do this exactly?
That exactly is the question the analysts are asking. And the question is, yeah, this looks very optimistic and quite very ambitious. We don't know how. Rather than just coming around and say, I want to do this, we need to know how it's going to happen. 500 billion in 2015. When we look at the statistics of the debt we are outstanding right now, by the end of 2015, there will be about 1.5 trillion naira worth of local debt still outstanding for federal government. So the question is federal government planning to redeem about 2/3 of that so that we have 500 billion? Are we saying that no matter what's coming on, we're not going to issue any new debt again? When these other ones get to maturity, are we not going to renew them? So we need more. Does it mean that going forward we are going to be expecting balance or surplus budget? Because as long as we continue to have deficit, we have to look for debt to cover the gap. So the question is, how do we plan to go? So we need more details. Well, I mean, we can forgive her that she's saying this just because it's just as a presentation, but we need a detailed report to come out afterwards. Say, this is how we want to do it, and we need her to take some staunch, decisive step to say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. Probably they have to have a pally with the legislators so that there won't be any problem when it comes to this action being taken. We need that fiscal consolidation, and it must start right now.
Now, very quickly, there are some questions about whether the local banks are in good enough shape to continue providing some of these funds or dealing with the government's debt as well, because, you know, they do have about 60% of the government. So give me an idea of the impact this is having on our banking sector as well.
Seriously, I think right now, it's actually a very positive effect that's having on the banking sector. Right now, we don't have any financial intermediation taking place anymore because government bonds and other fixed income instruments are so very attractive for the banks to transact in. So by placing money in there, they're fine. I mean, putting your money in some treasury bill of 15%, that makes some good money when your cost of funding is just about 6%. So it's positive for them. But the question is, should there be a run for cash? These guys have to sell down this debt. What does it cost? You know, then again, increasing interest rate. When the interest, if it is stable, it's fine for them. But if interest rates start to increase, they might have to be marked to market all these bonds they are holding, and therefore it's going to have some issue on them. Some of them are making some huge provisioning now for losses and stuff like that.
Yes.
Part of it is probably from
Coming
this
from.
bond that they'll be holding. So
well, thank you so much, Femi, for giving us a clear picture, a better picture of what's going on with